I always get anxious whenever I go to sell something online after what happened to me the last time I used Craigslist. It was around 2009, and I was trying to sell a car that I had after getting a new one. After listing it, it didn't take long for me to get a few responses, although only one of them seemed serious about the car. Most of them were just lowballing me offers that I didn't care about. This one guy though, his name was Caleb, and he said that if the car ran, he would give me what I was asking for in cash. We talked back and forth for a while before he explained that he couldn't meet me until after work that day, which wasn't until around 7:30 at night. And even though I didn't want to meet in the dark, I figured that I would be safe in my own home, so I told him to come by whenever he wanted to. He showed up around 8 and immediately asked if he could use the bathroom. I didn't mind since he was about to possibly buy my car, and when he was done, I brought him over to the vehicle. I brought a flashlight out with me so that he could see the car a little better, and he seemed to like everything about it. We even hopped inside and turned it on so that he could see it start up. But when all was said and done, I could tell by the look on his face that he wasn't going to be buying the car. He said that he liked everything about it, he was just a little strapped for cash right now, and if it was still around in a week, he would love to take it off my hands. I was a bit disappointed since I felt like we both wasted our time, but I didn't want to seem like a jerk, so I just shook his hand and told him to reach out to me when he had the money. As I went to walk back inside though, he called out and claimed that he left his phone in my bathroom. I sighed and told him that he could come and get it as we both walked back into my house. He ran toward the bathroom to get his phone, or at least that's what I thought. I turned to close the front door behind me, but before I could get it shut, someone from the outside slammed their body into it, forcing it open. I fell backward at the force of the door swinging open, and when I looked up, I saw 2 other men had walked into my house. I tried to get back to my feet, but before I could, I felt 2 hands on my shoulders, and I looked up to see Caleb standing over me. He told me to chill out as he held me down on the ground. I asked him what was going on, which was when he explained that he didn't have the money for my car, but he was going to be taking it anyway. I tried to argue, but as soon as I resisted, he and his friends started attacking me. I tried to curl up into a ball and protect my sides, but as soon as one of them kicked me in the spine, my body just sort of went limp. I couldn't move as I heard the 3 men running around my house and rummaging through all of my things, and as they were leaving, I heard one of them asking what they should do with me. Thankfully, there was one man there who told them to just leave me be. He said that I probably couldn't move anyways, which he was right about. The men left, and I spent about an hour or 2 trying to muster all of the strength I had to get up, but I couldn't seem to move any part of my body aside from my head. I laid on the floor as time passed, and the nighttime eventually turned to morning. By that point, I was so tired and in so much pain that I wished I could just fall asleep. But that was when I heard the sound of my neighbor slamming their front door shut. I always hated that noise, but for once I was happy to hear it. I began screaming out as loud as I could for help, and it took a few minutes, but eventually there was a knock at my door. I yelled for them to come in, and that was when my neighbor found me and called 911. After getting to the hospital, it was discovered that I had dislocated multiple vertebrae, but thankfully they were able to be set back into place, and after months of physical therapy, I was able to regain almost all motor function. The police took my statement while I was at the hospital on the day that I arrived, but since then, I haven't heard anything. They never found my car or Caleb and his friends. I moved back in with my parents after that until I could find a new place to live. I just didn't trust staying in that house anymore. When I was unemployed, I would take any job that I could get. That meant looking on sites like Craigslist for a job, even if it was a one-time thing. That was when I found a job offer for a house cleaning that was needed as soon as possible. The listing was for an expedited cleaning, and the pay that they were offering seemed too good to be true, which I learned the hard way meant that it was. But still, I needed the money, so I got in touch with the person who posted the job and asked if they still had an opening. After talking on the phone for a minute, I was told to head to the address that they gave me and I could get started right away. It only took 5 to 10 minutes to get to the house, and when I pulled up, I was happy to see that it wasn't a huge house. Just one floor and a small garage, it looked like. I hopped out of my truck and pulled out the small cleaning supplies that I managed to scrounge up and rang the doorbell. The man who I thought was the owner answered the door and greeted me by saying thanks for helping me out on such short notice, and right away, he apologized because he said it would most likely be a late night for me. That wasn't an issue though, so I didn't mind, but that was when things got a little weird. He brought me into the house, which was where I noticed that the carpet had a few red stains on it. He told me not to mind that, it was just a bit of wine, but the owner was getting rid of the carpet anyway, so I didn't have to worry about that. He brought me into the kitchen and began explaining that he wanted all of the surfaces in the house wiped down. I nodded and said yes sir, but for some reason, he seemed to get more stern with me as he reiterated that he didn't want to see a single smudge on the glass or the counters. Again, I nodded and started getting my rags and spray out to start cleaning. As I started though, I sort of expected the man to walk away and let me clean, but for some reason, he just stayed put and watched me. I started to get a weird feeling as I noticed he was looking over everything I cleaned and getting really close so that he could examine it. Every move I made, he all but mimicked as he followed closely behind. What was really odd though was that he didn't seem interested in small talk at all. I tried starting a few conversations with him, but all he did was nod or shake his head in response. As the day turned to night, I noticed another car pull into the driveway and the man went out to greet whoever it was. He told me to keep cleaning and that he would be back in a minute to check it out, so that's what I did. I kept cleaning, and when the guy came back inside, I asked him who it was and he told me not to ask so many questions. He said it was annoying, but I could tell that he was hiding something. I tried to shake off the strange feeling that I was getting, but I couldn't. Every time I looked at that man, it made me uneasy. After filling up a garbage bag with rags and trash, I let the man know that I needed to take the trash out, and he responded by saying that he would come with me. But instead of following me to the trash bin, he stopped right outside the door and began to light a cigarette. I got further and further away from him as I walked past the garage to the bins, but that was when I noticed something. As I walked past the garage, I could see the light was on, and I couldn't help but peer in through the small windows on the door. That was when I saw the car that had pulled up before, and standing next to it was a man who was putting something into the trunk of his car. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. Sticking out of the trunk, I could clearly see a single leg that hadn't been covered. I froze as I heard the man near the front door yelling over to me. I looked back toward the garage and saw that the man inside was now looking at me too. I didn't know what to do, so I took off running. I could hear the man who had been following me around yelling for me to slow down as he started to chase me, but thanks to the adrenaline coursing through my body, there was no chance he was catching me. I left my car behind as I sprinted down the road to a friend's house that lived in that area, and when I got there, I didn't even knock, I just ran in. I explained to him and his wife what I had just seen and asked them to please call the police. The cops arrived and then I sent them to the address where I had worked, where they didn't find anybody. There was no car in the garage, and the only one on the property was my car in the driveway. The officers tried to contact the homeowner, and when they got a hold of him, they found out that it was just his summer house and he hadn't been there all year. At that point, all they could do was look out for the car that I saw in the garage, but as far as I know, it was never found. About 2 years after becoming husband and wife, Marcus and I finally had enough to move out of our apartment and put a down payment on a house of our own. We immediately began contacting the local real estate agents, but eventually found a house through Craigslist that looked really promising. But you know you can't judge a book by its cover, and when I ended up seeing the place for myself, I knew that we shouldn't be using Craigslist anymore. You see, after contacting the owner of the home through the provided email, my husband and I set up a date to go meet with him. However, right before we were about to leave and drive to my property, my husband got called into work. He wanted me to wait for a time that he could come see the house with me, but I told him that I would be fine and that if I needed anything I would just call him. He was still on edge about it, but he eventually gave in and just told me to be careful. I drove about 40 minutes to the address where the owner told me to meet him, and when I pulled up, I was pleasantly surprised. The outside of the house looked amazing, although the lawn was a bit overgrown. I pulled into the driveway and saw the owner, an elderly man named Franklin, who greeted me and apologized for the state of the yard. He said that he owned a few houses in the county and hadn't visited this one in quite a while. He assured me that he would have the lawn mowed before I signed any papers, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I was just more excited to just see the inside. We made our way up to the front door, and when Franklin went to put his key in and unlock the door, he paused. I looked at him and could tell that something wasn't right, so I asked him what was going on. That's when he said that it was already unlocked. I started to feel a small pit forming in my stomach as I began to worry about going inside. But Franklin said that he's sure he just forgot to lock it that last time he was there, but that didn't calm my nerves. Still, I couldn't just walk away because of a gut feeling, so I decided to enter the house and take a look for myself. As soon as we walked through the door, I could tell that someone had been living there. There was trash everywhere, and half-smoked cigarette butts on the coffee table and floor around it. Franklin was in pure shock, and I could tell that he was getting angry at the thought of someone breaking into his house. He started to look around and call out to see if anyone was still there, but no one responded. I pulled out my phone and began calling my husband to let him know that we might need to look at a different location, and when he heard the trembling in my voice, he could tell that I was scared. And just as he was telling me that he was going to take a break from work and meet me at the house, I heard something that made me jump and almost drop the phone. Coming from above me, I heard the sound of metal rattling, followed by light footsteps. I turned to Franklin to see if he had heard it, and I could tell by his wide eyes that he did. Both of us stared up at the ceiling as I explained to my husband that I heard something in the attic. I told the homeowner that he should call the police, but he was too infuriated to even hear me as he approached that pull-down cord to drop the ladder for the attic. The hinge creaked and the ladder unfolded to a climbable position. Franklin called out one more time before he started climbing up. The upper half of his body disappeared into the darkness of the attic, but before he could climb all the way up, I heard him let out a quick scream before hearing a loud thud. Franklin's body fell off the ladder like it was a rag doll, and I could see right away that he had a wound on the top of his head. I looked up at the top of the ladder and let out a loud scream as I saw a manly face looking back down at me. I ran out of that house as fast as I could and toward my car in the driveway as I called out for my husband, who was still on the phone. I told him to call the cops as I got into my car and turned the key in the ignition. As I pulled out of the driveway, I could see the man who was staring down at me from the attic. He was now standing at the front door looking out at me in the driveway. I pulled out as fast as I could and drove down the road where I found a gas station that I could wait at. My husband called the police and then met me at the gas station where we both waited for them to arrive. We all drove back to the house where they found Franklin still unconscious but alive. He was taken away in an ambulance as the police checked the rest of the home. They didn't find any signs of anyone else inside, but in the attic, they found a set of shackles that seemed to have dried blood on them. I overheard one of the officers saying that they think the house was being used to hold hostages by whoever attacked Franklin. My husband and I decided that we would look elsewhere for a home, and I hadn't been on Craigslist since. I never want to deal with anything like that again.